You call that a march? I've seen wounded gory slugs move faster than that. The training yard of Orland Military Academy rang with laughter. The JVX cadets, towering reptilian beings with deep blue scales and bright golden eyes, sneered as they watched the human recruits shuffle through a drill exercise. They stood in a loose group, their uniforms pristine, their own training sessions light years ahead, at least in their minds. To them, humans were a joke, an oddity, a species that had stumbled into the galaxy's military stage by accident. You humans rely too much on rhythm and precision, one of the JVX cadets called out. We fight with instinct, with power. What good is a straight formation when the enemy rains plasma on your heads? More laughter followed. The human cadet said nothing. They had heard it all before. Weak, fragile, slow. Humans were the underdogs of the interstellar military alliances, barely tolerated in joint academies like this one. The other species were built for war. Massive Varkon with thick carapaces, swift RXY hunters with razor-sharp reflexes, and of course the JVX, whose sheer strength made them terrifying in close combat. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, one of the human drill instructors, watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, his jaw tight. He had seen this happen year after year. Humans were underestimated every time, but the JVX had made a mistake. They thought training drills were the measure of war. "All right, enough standing around," Hale called out, stepping forward. His voice was calm, firm. "You've had your laughs. Now let's see how well you do in a real combat scenario." That got their attention. The JVX turned their golden eyes toward him, intrigued. They had been waiting for this moment. An excuse to show their superiority in a live-fire exercise. The training field was quickly transformed. Barricades rose from the ground, automated turrets clicked into place, and drone scouts hovered above, ready to track movement. The cadets were split into two teams, humans on one side, JVX on the other. Each would have access to a full array of simulated battlefield technology, from pulse rifles to energy shields. The objective was simple: reach the base, neutralize resistance, and claim victory. The JVX stepped onto the field with wide grins, flexing their claws. This would be easy. They were stronger, faster, and they knew it. Then the whistle blew. The humans disappeared, not literally, but within seconds they had melted into the terrain, moving low, silent shadows against the rock formations. The JVX expected an honourable charge, a head-on engagement. That didn't happen. The first JVX went down without firing a single shot. A sniper round, simulated but more than enough to register a kill, struck him in the chest, flashing red across his armour. "Sniper 1100, one of the JVX bellowed. They turned, firing blindly, but there was nothing there, no heat signature, no movement. Another fell, then another. The JVX were used to brute force, to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower in close-range combat. But the humans weren't playing that game. They were ghosts. They struck from the edges, vanishing before retaliation could even begin. One JVX, furious, lunged forward, slamming a fist into a barricade where he thought a human was hiding. The impact cracked the stone. Nothing. Then he heard it, the faintest click of a trigger. He spun too late. A stun grenade rolled between his feet, detonating with a flash. The system registered him as incapacitated. Across the battlefield, the JVX found themselves trapped in a fight they didn't understand. Their instincts, so deadly in brawls and single combat, were useless against enemies who refused to engage on their terms. Every advance they made was met with an ambush. Every defensive position was flanked. They had laughed at human drills, called them pointless. But war wasn't just about strength. It was about strategy. And in that, the humans were relentless. The JVX leader, Cadet Urich, growled in frustration. He had fought in dozens of academy skirmishes, but this was different. His team was down to 4. The humans still had 8. He could hear them moving somewhere, but he couldn't pin them down. He turned to his last remaining squad mates, his voice low. "We regroup. Defensive formation." They moved back to back, scanning every angle. The humans wouldn't be able to surprise them now. Then the ground shook. A charge, a real one, came from the left. A squad of humans rushed in, firing. The JVX roared, unloading plasma rounds, taking down 2. Finally, Arik roared, "A real fight." Then he heard the sharp beep of his combat sensor. The charge had been a feint. Before he could react, a second human squad hit from the opposite side. Controlled bursts, tactical movement, pinpoint accuracy. Arik barely managed to turn before the simulation system registered a direct hit to his back. His display went red. Defeated. The training siren wailed, signalling the end of the match. Silence followed. The JVX stood staring at the humans. They had lost, not by brute force, not by firepower, by precision, by discipline, by a kind of warfare they hadn't respected until now. Hale stepped onto the field, arms crossed again, expression unreadable. He looked at the JRVX cadets, then at the human recruits. "Still think our drills are useless?" Yurik wiped a clawed hand across his snout, exhaling hard. He didn't answer right away. His golden eyes moved across the human cadets, something different in his gaze now. They had won, and for the first time he understood why. The lesson had been learned, but the war wasn't over yet. The silence in the training field stretched thick with the weight of what had just happened. The JVX cadets, so confident at the start, now stood in quiet disbelief. The human recruits, still catching their breath, didn't gloat. They didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. Lieutenant Hale let the moment settle before he stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. This is how we fight. This is how we win." He let his gaze sweep across both groups. The lesson isn't over. Yurik, the JVX leader, tensed at that. His pride burned, but he was no fool. The humans had bested them in the exercise, but exercises weren't war. He straightened, fist clenched, and met Hale's eyes. "We underestimated you," he admitted. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. "Your drills, your formations, they are not as pointless as we believed." Hale nodded. "And yet you still don't understand the full extent of what makes us dangerous." That got a reaction. A ripple of tension moved through the JVX squad. They had just been wiped out, humiliated in a training match they thought would be effortless. Now Hale was saying they had seen only a fraction of what humans were capable of. Yurik's jaw tightened. "Then show us." Hale turned to the academy instructors watching from the observation deck. "Double the difficulty of the next exercise, live rounds." A murmur passed through the audience. Even among the human instructors, that was a serious escalation. Training simulations were one thing. Blunt force stun rounds disabling sensors. Live rounds meant the risk of injury, real consequences. The JVX stiffened. Their pride stung, but they weren't cowards. If the humans wanted to raise the stakes, they would meet them. The field shifted again. Barricades hardened. Automated turrets reloaded with lethal but concussive force. This time, however, no squads would be assigned. It would be a free-for-all. No fixed teams, no predetermined alliances, each cadet for himself. Survival of the fittest. The moment the starting klaxon blared, the field erupted into chaos. The JVX, smarting from their previous loss, came in hard, determined to overpower the humans before they could disappear again. Their mistake was thinking that the humans would play the same way they had in the last round. This time, they didn't vanish. This time, they didn't wait. The first shots cracked through the air before the JVX even made it past their starting positions. The humans didn't scatter. They advanced. Controlled bursts of gunfire cut through the dust as the humans pushed forward, using cover efficiently. Each movement was calculated. They weren't reacting to the JVX charge. They were dictating the pace of battle. Urich barely dodged a shot that would have taken him down. Rolling behind a boulder, he had no time to process how different this fight already felt. The humans weren't just avoiding conflict now, they were forcing it on their terms. A JVX to his right roared, charging at a lone human recruit. The human sidestepped at the last second, dropping low and firing upward. A concussive round struck the charging JVX in the chest, sending him sprawling. Urich moved fast, adjusting. He found cover, recalculating. The humans weren't just ghosts now, they were predators. 2 JVX behind him fell, taken from a distance by a human sniper perched somewhere high. Urich growled in frustration. He had to find a way to break their control. He spotted a human reloading behind a broken turret and lunged. He was fast, faster than any human, faster than most species in the academy. His claws swiped, aiming to disarm the human. The human dropped his rifle and pulled a "Combat!" that knife. In the same motion, Urich barely twisted in time as the blade slashed across his armour. The human used the momentum to twist behind him, a second strike coming before Urich had even recovered. Urich kicked backward, sending the human rolling. But he was already back on his feet, weapon raised. Humans weren't supposed to be this fast. Urich narrowed his eyes. This wasn't just tactics, it wasn't just drills. Humans adapted. Another explosion rocked the field. The fight was still raging, the line shifting constantly. The JVX were fighting harder than before, but the humans were evolving with every second. Urich exhaled sharply. This wasn't over yet. He wasn't going to let his species be beaten twice in a row. He wasn't going to let himself lose again. Urich's breath came fast, his chest rising and falling as he assessed the battlefield. The JVX were fighting with everything they had, but the humans were still in control. Every move they made forced the JVX to react rather than act. Every push the JVX attempted was met with a counterstrike before they could gain ground. The human, who had nearly cut him earlier, was still there, standing just beyond the wreckage of a turret, weapon raised. Urich could see it in his eyes. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't luck. The humans had planned for this kind of fight. They had trained for it. The human didn't hesitate. He moved first. Urich barely dodged the incoming shot, the force of the concussive round blasting against his shoulder. He pivoted, using his superior strength to drive forward, closing the distance. The human had speed, but Urich had raw power. He swung his arm in a wide arc. The human ducked, but this time Urich anticipated the movement. He adjusted mid-swing, clipping the human's side and sending him stumbling back. Urich lunged. A crack of gunfire split the air. Pain flared across Urich's back. He spun, seeing another human positioned on a higher ledge, rifle still aimed. A sniper. They had baited him. His fist clenched. He wouldn't let it end here. Urich rolled for cover just as another round struck the ground where he had been standing. He growled under his breath. The humans weren't just unpredictable. They worked together with precision. That was the real difference. JVX warriors were trained for personal strength, for dominance in direct combat. Humans fought as a unit, covering each other's weaknesses, reinforcing their advantages. It made them impossible to isolate, impossible to break apart. Another explosion shook the field as a human cadet lobbed a grenade toward a group of JVX trying to rally near a bunker. The shockwave sent 2 of them sprawling. The fight was slipping away. Urich knew it, and so did his remaining teammates. But the thought of surrender was unthinkable. If brute force wasn't going to work, they needed to fight like humans. He glanced at his squad, 3 JVX left. That was enough. "Split up," he barked. "Force them to chase. Move fast. Strike when they don't expect it." His teammates hesitated. This wasn't how JVX fought, but there was no other way. Urich didn't wait for arguments. He moved first, breaking from cover, weaving through the terrain in sharp, unpredictable movements. The humans fired, but he didn't charge them this time. He ducked between structures, forced them to guess his next step. The others followed his lead. The battlefield shifted. The JVX had always relied on brute force to win fights. Now they were adapting. They weren't standing their ground anymore. They were moving like the humans, firing in short, controlled bursts, using the terrain to their advantage, never staying in one place for too long. And it was working. A human cadet was caught off guard, a JVX taking him down with a well-placed shot. Another human was forced to retreat when Urik's squad hit their flank faster than expected. The humans felt the shift. For the first time, they were the ones reacting. Hale, watching from the sidelines, narrowed his eyes. The JVX were learning faster than he had expected. He turned to the human recruits on the field. "Adjust," he ordered through the comms. "They're using your own tactics against you. Change the game." The human cadets understood immediately. The battlefield shifted again. Suddenly, the humans weren't pressing forward anymore. They weren't pushing the JVX back. Instead, they were falling away, pulling back into defensive positions, letting the JVX think they had gained ground. Urik's squad hesitated. This wasn't what they had expected, and that was the trap. The moment the JVX moved forward to press their advantage, the humans struck from the sides. Snipers picked off the ones who stepped too far ahead. Others fell back, luring the JVX into crossfire. They had never stopped controlling the battle, they had just changed the way they did it. Urik clenched his teeth as he saw another of his squad mates go down. They had almost turned the fight in their favour. Almost. But almost wasn't enough. A sharp click echoed from behind him. Urik turned. A human rifle was aimed directly at him. The cadet standing there wasn't the one he had fought earlier. This one had a calm, steady gaze, his weapon unwavering. Urik exhaled. The human had won again, but the battle wasn't over yet. Urik's breathing was steady, despite the rifle aimed at his chest. He locked eyes with the human cadet standing before him, weapon firm, but not gloating. There was no arrogance in his stance, no mockery in his expression, just focus, just certainty. The JVX had lost again. A voice crackled through the comms, cutting through the tense silence. Match over. Humans secure the field. The battlefield fell still. The training weapons powered down, the simulated explosions ceased, and the automated turrets deactivated. The match was done. The remaining JVX cadets stepped back, their shoulders tense, their gazes flickering between each other and their fallen comrades. Urik let out a slow breath and lowered his head slightly. The humans hadn't just won. They had controlled every moment of the battle, every shift in momentum. The JVX had adapted, had fought harder, had pushed past their own rigid combat style, and it still hadn't been enough. Urik had thought brute strength would win. He had thought strategy alone was a weakness. He had been wrong. The humans fought in ways that were impossible to predict. They weren't bound by instinct, weren't trapped in a singular way of thinking. They changed. They learned. They adapted. Not just over years, not just over months, but within seconds. That was what made them dangerous, and that was why they had won. Hale approached the field, his expression unreadable. He scanned both groups before finally speaking. Twice now, the humans have won. Not because they are stronger, not because they are faster, but because they see war differently than you do. He turned his gaze to the JVX. You fight as warriors. Then he looked at the humans. They fight as survivors. Urik exhaled slowly, staring at the human cadets. He had mocked them before, dismissed their rigid drills and endless formations. But he understood now. Their methods weren't about control, they were about flexibility. The JVX were powerful. The humans were unpredictable. And in war, unpredictability was deadlier than strength. Hale gave one last nod before stepping back. Training's over, you all did well. Dismissed. The human cadets exchanged tired glances but offered no cheers, no boasting. They had expected to win. The JVX, on the other hand, remained standing in quiet contemplation. Ulrich turned to his remaining teammates, then back to the human who had nearly taken him down in the fight. There was no hatred in his stare now, no resentment, only respect. He stepped forward, extending his hand. The human paused for a brief second before taking it. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The war wasn't over, but the lesson had been learned.